because this was back in the day where booze was medicine. And our wonderful quack doctors would write prescriptions for whiskey to cure what ails you. Fevers, colds, boredom.
So now I have a question. Like, would my HMO cover it at the time? I mean, this is great. I can go get a prescription right now. Maybe I can get the Bland's. There's no substitution, right? I must have the Bland's.
Welcome in. We are the Bourbon Brothers, and this is the Liquid Courage Show. We have another fantastic show lined up for you tonight. But before we get started, let's get my co-host in here. He is my partner in crime and the one I can always depend on to bring the funny. He's still broadcasting deep below the frozen tundra at Heinz Field. Ken, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. It's cold outside, lots of ice, so I'm looking forward to warming up. This is kind of like a deja vu for me. It's like we've done this before. I don't know about you.
It does have that reminiscent feeling of having been here and done this before. Well, let's jump right in. If you're new to the show, the format is simple. First, we're going to kick things off with a tasting and discussion of a spirit. It's usually a bourbon. It's a bourbon tonight. And we will continue to enjoy said spirit throughout the remainder of the show. As for the remainder of the show, we're going to focus on a specific episode of a favorite television series where we will start with the pilot and we'll work our way through episode by episode to the series finale. Tonight, we're going to be discussing Season 2, Episode 3 of Kurt Sutter's Sons of Anarchy, titled Fix. For those of you that are watching the show on YouTube, I want to remind you that we published the show in 3 parts. You are currently watching Part 1, which is a great place to start. And that's going to cover the bourbon tasting, and then parts 2 and 3 will be the discussion of the episode. So please remember to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a single show. Also, if you don't want to look at our ugly mugs, or you're going to take a road trip and you want to listen in the car, you can also subscribe to the podcast version of the show at iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher, and about 14 other places where your favorite podcasts are available. Also, we want to hear from you. Send us your praise, your questions, your hate comms. Let us know how we're doing. What do you like about the show? What do you dislike? And what would you like to see more of? You can leave your comments in the comments section below of this video, or you can email your questions to us at ask@bourbonbros, that's BROS.TV. And as we always like to say, if your question doesn't suck, we may even answer it on a future show. And with all that out of the way, Ken, what do we have to drink tonight with episode 3?
Well, I'm excited for this one, and I couldn't resist because I finally was able to put my hands on the bottle, so I've already sampled this. But we're going with finally, the Buffalo Trace this evening.
Ah, the Buffalo Trace. Now
this is the Kentucky Straight Bourbon.
The Kentucky Straight Bourbon, which we had announced we would do on a prior show, and yet we were not able to do that on a prior show.
That's correct. I had to get very creative on how I procured this, but it's here, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so we won't get into the details, but for those that may not be aware, we had announced we were going to do Buffalo Trace because we assumed it would be widely available. You could not find one in the state of PA.
I could not.
And as of today, while you have one in your hand, there is still not one available for purchase in PA that you've been able to find. So as you said, you had to get very creative.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll leave it at that. But hey, you finally have it. We're finally doing the review, and I'm excited to dig into this one. This is kind of their flagship, what should be widely available bourbon out of Buffalo Trace. I think the only other bourbon we've done to date out of Buffalo Trace Distillery is the Eagle Rare, which you and I are both fans of.
Yeah, definitely.
So I know you couldn't resist. You already had to dip in and have a little taste of the Buffalo Trace, as have I. But let's go ahead and if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and put that bottle up to the mic and pop the cork so we can get that fantastic sound. There we go.
There it is.
And as we pour, I'll just go through some of the download of the basic facts on this one. Again, Buffalo Trace Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Generally, the price is about $25, which is pretty affordable. You may have had to get more creative. I'm not sure.
No, the price point was about the same. I did have to. There were some added costs. We'll leave it at that.
But it's about a $25 bottle of bourbon. It's classified as a straight bourbon. It is out of Buffalo Trace Distillery, parent company being Sazerac. Release date's ongoing. It's a 90 proof bourbon. There is no age statement, but Buffalo Trace says it's at least 8 years. The rumor is between 8 to 10.
Okay.
And they said it's not uncommon where it's usually about 9.5 years.
Okay. So we're not dealing with a real young bourbon.
No. And in fact, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people like about this is for $25, you're getting a bourbon that's been aged a decent amount of time, proper amount of time. And you'll also like this, Ken. The mash bill, while technically it's undisclosed, we don't know the exact mash bill, it is rumored to be a very high percentage of corn. And when I say high, up to 90% is rumored.
Wow. So that could explain the sweetness.
Yes. So we'll get into that in a minute with the tasting. But as I always like to do, let me give you the marketing speak, and we'll let our bourbon marinate here for a minute.
Okay. These are always good. This marketing, speak here, the lingo. It's a creative.
Buffalo Trace Distillery will not let you down. This is a good one.
I'm ready.
All right.
Lay it on me.
I encourage you to close your eyes and see through your mind's eye. Ancient buffalo carved paths through the wilderness that led American pioneers and explorers to new frontiers. One such trail led to the banks of the Kentucky River, where Buffalo Trace Distillery has been making bourbon whiskey the same way for more than 200 years. In tribute to the mighty buffalo and the rugged, independent spirit of the pioneers who followed them, we created our signature Buffalo Trace Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey.
I'm tearing up over here. That's great. That's beautiful.
I mean, if that doesn't make you feel American, I don't know what will.
Right. No. Well done.
I mean, you're literally drinking the American spirit in your glass.
That's great.
So the bar is high now.
Okay.
We've got big expectations, but let's give it a taste. I'm going to start with the nose.
As will I. That's going to be good.
Yeah. Now you do get a little bit of that, I guess, stronger ethanol off the nose, but I also detect some of that sweetness that I'm expecting.
Yeah, I can sense that as well.
I don't know if it's a placebo effect or if there's actual sweetness on the nose, but my brain tells me this is going to be on the sweeter side.
Okay. Well, are you ready?
Let's do it. Let's raise a glass.
All right, to the mighty buffalo.
To the mighty buffalo. Cheers. I'm just going to say it, Ken. That's a very drinkable bourbon.
Very drinkable. What a lot of flavor. Really well rounded. Not too much burn. A taste of vanilla notes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little caramel.
Yeah, I would say that to me, this falls in line with what I would consider a very kind of quintessential classic bourbon flavor profile. You have that the oak and char with the sweetness from the corn. You get that, as you said, that vanilla and that caramel. I don't know that I could pick it out in a blind taste test, but it would definitely be one of those where I just go, that is a classic American bourbon.
Agreed. It's very, very well rounded. Like you said, drinkable. This could catch up with you. This could be dangerous.
Yeah, and at $25, it's not so good that I would be afraid to mix it in a cocktail, yet it's great as a sipping bourbon as well.
Yeah, I'll say.
So As I'll give you an opportunity to enjoy the Buffalo Trace because I can tell you like this one. So let me go through some of the fun facts that I was able to dig up in my research of Buffalo Trace. So we already know the iconic name comes from a historic road that was used by American bison to travel the salt-rich land of Kentucky to the Illinois prairies.
Mm-hmm.
The distillery has had a few names over the years. It was originally known as OFC, which stands for Old Fire Copper Distillery.
That's a great name too.
Yeah. It was later, and for really the longest period, it was referred to as the George T. Stagg Company, which was named after its second owner. And then it was finally rechristened Buffalo Trace in 1999 after Sazerac bought it. And one of the things I like is Buffalo Trace actually puts out a bourbon called George T. Stagg. So as kind of an homage to the second owner that owned the distillery for the longest period of time, it's nice to see that that name lives on. Another important name on the Buffalo Trace roster is that of Elmer T. Lee. Does that name ring a bell at all?
Vaguely.
So Elmer was almost not hired by Buffalo Trace, or this probably would have been when it was either OFC or George T. Stagg. I'm not sure which, but he became the first master distiller, and this is his big claim to fame. He's responsible for creating the first ever single barrel bourbon.
First ever. Okay.
First ever. And that bourbon is still available today, which is the Blanton's single barrel.
That's probably where I've read about him then.
So this is because of Elmer T. Lee. And he is the one that ultimately introduced Americans to the concept of a premium bourbon.
Wow. Now, I do not yet have that in my collection. I will need to
dig out your wallet, my friend.
I'm in
dig
the market.
Out your wallet.
We'll see if I can get a good deal on it somewhere.
It's pretty wild as I kind of watch and track some of the different bourbons that I'm on the hunt for. There are parts of the country where people will say that they found a Blanton's or a Weller. Bourbons that are hard to find in general, and when you do, they tend to be pretty pricey. And you'll find that people will oftentimes run across them, and they'll be available at kind of the MSRP in that $60 range. Mm-hmm. And then other places, they're over $200. I think that bottle of Blanton's I found was about $125, and I was just happy to be able to find it. But that's double what I've seen it elsewhere for, and half of what I've seen it in other places. So
same. Yeah, I've seen it double that easily.
It varies quite widely, and it almost makes you want to buy one to have and one to just save as almost an investment, because again, these are all single barrels.
I agree with that approach completely. That's what I do with most every bottle I buy.
Well, and let's be frank, that's just so you don't have to open one.
Right. That's the illness that I have.
One for display, one for drinking, which, hey, I'm all for it. As long as we get to drink one. I still don't know if you're ever going to forgive me for making you open that Johnny Walker Blue.
Yeah, that's almost gone.
So we've got Elmer T. Lee to thank for the single barrel. Buffalo Trace is now a National Historic Landmark, which it received in 2013. And I love that they're one of the oldest continuously operating distilleries in America, literally distilling bourbon before Prohibition, during Prohibition, and after Prohibition.
Really?
Which is just amazing.
Yeah.
The distillery is rumored to be haunted.
Now, is this on the Bourbon Trail? If we ever make it
is
out
on the
there,
Bourbon Trail. Yes, this is on the list. This is on the list.
I'm ready to see a haunted distillery.
They also do the Taylor, E.H. Taylor bourbon, which is another one that's on my list that I've been looking for that's very hard to find. He was known as the father of the modern bourbon industry. And again, Buffalo Trace Distillery, in an homage to E.H. Taylor, have an E.H. Taylor bourbon that is supposed to be very good. And probably most well known, the coveted bottle that everyone wants to get is what, Ken? If you're a bourbon drinker, what's the one bottle that everybody wants to have at some point in their life?
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot here. Give me a clue.
The Pappy.
Yeah, the Pappy Van Winkle. Yeah, of course. How'd I miss that?
And that also comes out of Buffalo Trace.
Those are really that's terribly expensive.
Yes.
Now, if
it
anyone...
is produced at the distillery under a joint venture with the Van Winkle family,
Okay.
but that is coming out of Buffalo Trace.
Wow. Now, if any of our listeners are 15, 20 listeners at this point, if they have a connection for the Pappy Van Winkle, let us know, because I like to pick up a bottle of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's, and that's the thing. When you look at kind of the bourbons that are coveted by aficionados that everyone's out on the, kind of watching it on the hunt for, and I think about the ones that are on my short list. I want an E.H. Taylor. I want a Weller. I wanted a Blanton's. And all of these are coming out of Buffalo Trace Distillery.
Yeah,
and even Eagle Rare, which again, we did find and we are fans of.
We are fans of that. We like it.
And we did the 10-year. I'd love to find an 18-year as well. There's just some really great bourbons coming out of Buffalo Trace, which is why it's an absolute must when we hit the trail.
I think a side effect of this show is going to be ratcheting our tolerance for spending, because things that we are tasting, they just keep getting better, and so we're just going to keep raising the bar.
Yes.
That's dangerous.
It is dangerous. Yes. And again, because we have to drink it on this show, we can't even claim that it's for investment purposes.
Right.
Which I know you're not a fan of.
Right. No.
So, yeah, those are just a few of the fun facts, but other than the Eagle Rare, I've not really had a chance to get much into the Buffalo Trace product offering, but I've been excited to try this because, again, this one kind of fits in with the Bullets, Woodford Reserves, those other kind of more entry point priced bourbons that are above, that are kind of widely available, and Buffalo Trace fits that bill. And I would say this one gives those a run for their money.
Yeah, I can see why. This is great. I'm gonna have to top it off again already. This is really, really good. So I had a question for you. You mentioned that in the summary that the distillery's been around for over 200 years, right? And doing my math and trying to recall history, there was Prohibition.
Mm-hmm.
So this, you mentioned before, and during and after. How did they get away with manufacturing during Prohibition?
That, my friend, is a fine question. And one that did require a little investigating, because I had the same question. And I initially thought, were they just bootlegging, and because Prohibition's over, they're now just admitting it? No, they were legally distilling bourbon during Prohibition. And so, yes, how is that possible? So Prohibition closed down almost every alcohol producer in the country.
Right.
Except for a small number, a select few. And Buffalo Trace
Doesn't make sense.
was one of only 4. Buffalo Trace was one of only 4 distilleries allowed to remain open.
Did they pay someone off? How did this happen?
So here's what happened. A small number, in this case 4 distilleries like Buffalo Trace, which was George T. Stagg back then, were allowed to stay open to make, Ken, medicinal whiskey.
Oh, for the love of God. Are you serious?
Because this was back in the day where booze was medicine. And our wonderful quack doctors back in the day would write prescriptions for whiskey to cure what ails you. Fevers, colds, boredom.
So now I have a question. Like, would my HMO cover it at the time? I mean, this is great. I can go get a prescription right now. Maybe I can get the blends. There's no substitution, right? I must have the blends.
And as you remember, it used to be that Coca-Cola had cocaine in it.
Yeah, I do recall that.
And that fell into the medicinal, prescription-oriented benefits of things you could get from a doctor. And so, if you didn't want to have to get the secret knock to your local speakeasy, you just had to know a doctor that would write you a prescription, and then you could get yourself some Buffalo Trace.
No generics. It must be authentic.
Must be authentic. So because they were one of the 4 distilleries selected to produce medicinal whiskey,
Wow.
they have been open and distilling for over 200 years.
Wow. Very interesting. Great research. I'll have to dig into that myself and see if I can find the other 3.
And as far as whether or not your HMO covers it, that remains to be seen. But
Yeah, well, that'll take a lot of research to figure that one out.
very interesting indeed. All right. That is going to do it for part 1. Next, we will dive into our discussion of Sons of Anarchy Season 2, Episode 3, titled Fix. Do remember to like and subscribe. Do check out our channel for more shows. But most importantly, if you have been able to find a bottle of Buffalo Trace, top off your glass and then come along and join us for part 2. It's all coming up next on the Liquid Courage Show. Stay with us.